Open the pod bay doors, please, pal.
All right.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
Look at the coast. We get together, have a few laughs.
A Movie Odyssey with Brad Patello and Gus Trout.
But listen, I care more about like how the movie feels and looks and works than like what it says, you know. Necessarily. I don't know. I'm not like a what it says kind of guy. Like,
Yeah, okay.
oh, that movie was actually about the Bible. Like, okay, who fucking gives it?
It's hard to. Well, okay, you can be that guy, and I'll be the other.
I'm bad cop.
I'll be the guy who like looks for deeper meaning, and you can be the guy who points out camera
listen,
shots and.
Yeah, I guess sometimes deeper meaning is when it's done well, and I've seen it enough, and it makes sense to me.
There's a conversation to be had. Well, maybe we should just start the podcast. Maybe we've already started. I don't know.
I see. This is what I'm talking about, and I don't want to break the fourth wall here because I like all this stuff. This is how I like coming in with a bunch of yada yada yada, and then
All right. Hey. Welcome. Hey, gang. It's Brad Patello here with my good friend Gus Trout. As always, this is our third recording of our as yet unnamed podcast. But we might have a name. I'm not going to say it. I don't want to jinx anything, but we might have a name. We might have settled on a name. We'll talk. So welcome. This is, all right, I'm just going to start again.
this is the best. No, this is the best. I want this to stay in every episode. It's the best.
I don't know. Right. Like start over
it's
3
so
times.
Good. Yes, it's so good. Hey, so
Right.
we watched the game.
Hey, gang. We're going to finally start. I don't know. Maybe I'll splice in some of that banter. I don't know.
Sure.
I feel like we'll see.
I think
that's what people listen to, though, right? I mean, that's why people tune in.
I also think that I think you should leave all this stuff in.
It'll be really long, though.
It's just us figuring out how to make a podcast.
Hey, gang. Welcome back. This is Brad Patello here again with my good friend, Gus Routh. And this week, we looked at The Game, which is a 1997 conspiracy thriller directed by David Fincher and starring Michael Douglas. Overall impressions, Gus, we'll start with you. This was your choice. What do you think of this movie?
I love this movie. I love David Fincher. Almost more, he might be my favorite director if I had to pick one. He kind of has a little bit of like a Ridley Scott thing going on because he started off with like music videos and commercials only for years. And when I watch this movie, I always think, I always think it's his first movie. Because Seven feels more mature and like there's something more to it. It's more like authentic or something. Although this movie is awesome. Like I love this movie. But yeah, I would just say like a lot of my praise kind of just goes to Fincher. Douglas is awesome too. Perfect casting on Douglas. But just I wrote down precise, classic style, all around cool. And that's what I would say for Fincher. He kind of has this movie came out in 97 and it could have came out today. Other than the technology with like, I mean, there are cell phones, but they're like flip phones, you know.
Pretty crude cell phones. Right.
But there's just, and I rented it on Amazon to watch it. I have it on VHS, in fact, but I opted out. And it does have you can see the film grain, which, is great. The film quality of it is awesome. But all in all, this movie could have came out today and it would have been like, oh yeah, this movie, there's nothing that necessarily states it like in the clothing or the hair or the waitress's hair that he ends up kind of going along with. What's her name? Christine.
It's always the technology that dates him.
It's the technology, but it's not necessary. It's still so, I don't know, contemporary.
If that's
it's
the
awesome.
only thing that dates a movie, then that's a good thing, because
I
there's
was
not
thinking,
really any way to get around that. I mean, this movie
Right.
obviously has phone booths in it.
Yeah, a lot of phone booths. There's a
Which-
scene where like 20 phone booths are
Yeah.
going off.
But it's if the only thing about a movie that looks dated is the technology, then that says a lot. It says that the themes and, the attitudes could be anywhere and any time. It's timeless. It's universal.
I'm surprised this movie hasn't necessarily been kind of ripped. It probably has, but not that I know of. But you could do something with like an app, or I could see.
I was gonna say I gotta confess that I never knew it was a David Fincher film. I saw it when it first came out. I don't think I saw it in the theater. I think I saw it when it came to video. I had seen Seven, but I guess at that time I wasn't really aware of David Fincher as a filmmaker. He had done Seven, of
Alien
course,
3.
and Alien 3. Now I did
Which
see
almost made him want to like quit his life. Like,
everything that's wrong with Alien 3 is not his fault.
oh no.
It's the script and the studio meddling, basically. He got called in to direct that.
Have you seen this is a great like box set DVD set of of the Alien series, and the behind the scenes for Alien 3 is just insane. The amount of like where it started and all the directors they went through and all the different stories, and like it was like this wooden planet that monks lived on for a while. It was really weird.
Well, you look at Alien 3 now, and I remember I didn't like it when I first saw it. But, you can kind of appreciate it now because it still has that sort of David Fincher quality to it.
He definitely has a way like that transcends through, like, Spielberg has a look. Wes Anderson has a look.
Kubrick
has a look. Like Fincher has a look that he's going for that like goes through the DP. Like, it's not like, oh, well, this guy shot it, so it's going to look like this. No, it's like David Fincher's telling the DP, I want it exactly like this.
Well, I was going to make an analogy to like when you look at, if you watch like the first 3 Harry Potter films, you get, you slog your way through the first 2 Chris Columbus films.
Right.
Not very interesting visual storytelling. Those first 2, it's very kind of static, not, really faithful to the book, not a lot of like liberties taken by the director. And then you get to the 3rd one and it just hits you over the head with, this is a new director, Alfonso Cuarón.
I kind of feel bad for Christopher. Like,
no, he did a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, he did a lot of good stuff, but it's one of those things where it's like he's like the first person to do it, and then it's like, hey, these are all the things you did wrong. I'm going to do them right this time.
Well, also the first 2 books are not as interesting either.
Yeah.
My
wife recently made me rewatch all of those movies, and I said we can do this on 2 stipulations. 1, we have to start at 3 at Prisoners, and 2, you have to watch Lord of the Rings after this with me.
Oh, okay.
And it worked.
Yeah. Those
actually, after watching those 2 series, the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potter, I was kind of like, fuck, Harry Potter series might be better. Shit.
Ooh, shots fired.
I know.
But that, what I'm saying? That film just hits you over the head with his style. That 3rd movie, it's just like, whoa, suddenly there's all these sweeping camera moves and all this really interesting storytelling. It's kind of like that with Alien 3, with David Fincher. It's like, it just, the first one's Ridley Scott, and then it's James Cameron, and then it's David Fincher, and they all have the signature look of the director.
Best sequel ever. Aliens.
Aliens, yeah. Alien 3 is like my third favorite Alien movie.
Yeah, that's the thing that saved Fincher, is that none of them after that have been good.
Yeah. All the ones that came after that make his look a lot better by comparison.
Yeah. That movie is shot really well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I wanted to say, too, since we're kind of talking about David Fincher's career, that, you know, he's one of my favorite directors, too. I think he has a great visual style. I think he's a very good storyteller. I think he's really good with light and color. And I was going to get into this with visual storytelling, but we might as well talk about it now. I think
Sure.
Well, the use of color in all his films is really striking. Well, let's just do a quick summary of the plot, since we didn't do that for Die Hard. At no point during the Die Hard conversation did we ever talk about what the movie was about. We never summarized.
Well, I mean, it's like, if you haven't seen fucking Die Hard, buddy.
By the way, spoiler alert for all the movies we talk about. We're just gonna move ahead with this podcast, assuming that you've seen the movie. There's gonna be spoilers for every movie. So the game is the story of Nicholas Van Orton, played by Michael Douglas. He's a very wealthy, miserly, and lonely investment banker. It's his 48th birthday.
He moves money from one place to the other.
Yes. His 48th birthday is a bit of a grim milestone for him, because on his dad's 48th birthday, he committed suicide by throwing himself off of the roof of their house. It's kind of set up. There's a lot of shots early on. The first 15 or 20 minutes of the film are dedicated to just kind of showing us his life. And the colors are very earth tones, black and white earth tones.
What grabbed me was all the old wood of all the, his house, his office building, the men's club he is a part of. Like when he's playing, I think he's playing squash, which would be even more bougie or waspy or whatever. It's a wooden court.
Yeah.
And it's like wood and gold, because it's bright yellow light.
Yeah, I wrote down gilded. Like it looks very there's a lot of gold and brown. They're trying to give you this sort of Great Gatsby sort of impression of this character.
Fincher, I don't think he is so good at that look, the rich look.
So, in the beginning of the film, a lot of and we established the character, a lot of earth tones and a lot of gold. It gives you this very Gilded Age look. He gets a visit from his brother, Conrad, who's played by a very young and very handsome Sean Penn. I had forgotten how handsome. I forgot how handsome Sean Penn was.
Brad's got a crush on Sean.
Slightly, yeah.
I think they did a great casting there for brothers. They both have the dimple and the chin.
They do, yeah. The Kirk Douglas,
and it feels right. Like you don't even question it. What's really interesting is it was written for a girl, and Jodie Foster was going to be the sister, and then she wanted to be it isn't a trivia.
Yeah.
She wanted to be the daughter, and then Michael Douglas was like, no. And then she ended up suing them. It was this whole ordeal.
I guess I prefer it to be I don't know. If he's got a daughter, then I don't know. I don't know how I would feel about the character arc if he had a daughter.
I think it works better with the whole father issue thing. Yeah. With the two brothers, and then the whole, I think that it works a lot better. And Sean Penn kills it. He's great. Conrad
is sort of like a ne'er-do-well. He's he's in and out of rehab. It's implied that he's sort of a drifter. They're kind of estranged from each other. And the brother gives him a birthday present, which is a card with an address and a phone number for this company. And that's kind of the plot of the movie. The company is I don't even know how to describe it. They put on these productions that involve somebody in this really intense and really detailed and really immersive experience, which is the game. And Michael Douglas,
they tell him that what it kind of is to an extent.
so the rest of the movie is basically Michael Douglas's character Nicholas immersed in this interactive experience, the game, which involves a lot of, at first, elaborate kind of pranks, and then it escalates into kind of a conspiracy thriller. His brother shows up at one point, and the end of the movie, we find out the whole thing has been part of the game. So like his brother showing up kind of midway through the movie where he's freaking out, that was him acting. Like it wasn't really,
the whole thing, every single thing was part of the game.
Yes.
I wrote this down, and I think that we should just get it out of the way. Like if you wanted to critique the logic of this movie and jump down that rabbit hole, then that's its whole. I think we should just skip over it's movie logic. It's not real logic. Because you'd be like, well, how'd they do this and how they do that and how they do this and how they didn't like when he jumps out of the, I
did have some questions about that final act, like that there were some serious suspension of disbelief issues, like just with
right. The problem is the movie's kind of, it's forcing you to think, is Douglas getting fucked over? Or is this still the game? Is he being taken advantage of? Or, and that's also the best part of the movie is like, it's keeping you guessing.
The twist at the end kind of makes some of it not make a lot of sense, but if you're watching it for the first time, it makes perfect sense. It's only when you start to kind of dissect it that it starts to look a little bit flimsy. Mainly,
it's so fun though. The entire way.
Well, so he starts to question his own reality. He starts to not be sure what's real and what's the game. And you have this whole like conspiracy thriller motif. His bank accounts get drained, and they foreclose on his house, and it starts to look like the company is actually like a fraud company that's like stealing all of his money and ruining his life.
Right. And like you were saying, Sean Penn's in the middle of the movie, whenever they reconnect, he's freaking out because he's saying like, they just keep fucking you over. They just keep on fucking you over. Yeah. But like they're basically blackmailing you for eternity.
Yeah. And it turns out that's an act, but to help us like question it, Sean Penn's character shows up and is freaking out and runs away, and there's a couple really good scenes there. I did write down that San Francisco, it was shot in San Francisco, and the geography and the architecture of San Francisco really, they're used in a great way. There's a lot of framing devices around the city and the architecture of the city. The scene where Conrad shows up freaking out kind of in the middle of the film, they have a final argument which is shot on a stairway, and there's really dramatic lighting throughout. This shot has like steam coming up, and
it kind of reminded me of Exorcist almost.
Yeah, so they have this argument on a stairway. There's a lot of like using the hills and the financial district and Chinatown. That worked out really well because he was able to stage a lot of stuff. In the end, and at one point, like kind of the end of the third act, the end of the second act, beginning of the third act involves he gets drugged and left in Mexico. They take him to Mexico and leave him in a coffin in a mausoleum. He's got to break out.
It's got a sweet white suit.
They take all of his money, and then he he has to sell his watch. That's
right. I actually paused because it's a really quick shot at the beginning when you first see it, and it's what is it? It says something about like it's from his mom.
Yeah, it's like like
his 18th birthday. Yeah,
the watch is like a symbol. It's engraved and it says "Happy 18th Birthday" or something on it. You see a quick shot of it at the beginning, and the camera lingers on it for long enough to where you're like, okay, I guess this is going to be important later. And then you see it again when he gets left for dead in Mexico at the beginning of Act 3. He ends up having to sell this watch to make his way back to San Francisco, and they show that. He's completely humbled at the end.
That I wrote down in that sequence. He must be like in Texas or something. He's like in a diner, but he's in America at this point. And I said he actually hits rock bottom because whenever he brings attention to everybody, and he's like, "Can I get a ride to San Francisco?"
And he's got like $18 left or something.
Yeah, that's where he is 100% rock bottom.
He has a character arc, to where he's very cold and impersonal at the beginning, and then at the end he's learned some humanity, and he values like his relationships more with other people, and his life becomes less about money, the
job and the money.
Yeah, and more about his relationships.
It's there's a parallel thing going on there with his the guy he fires, his dad's friend.
Yes.
Where he fires him. He's like, no, thanks, man. I'm living my life now. Like my wife thanks you. I thank you.
Yeah. And my, like you said before, Michael Douglas is the perfect person to play this character.
He's people would like jump to Gordon Gekko, but it's more grounded.
I think.
And he's almost more of a dick.
Well, I was going to say that even at the beginning of the film, this character is more likable than Gordon Gekko. I think Gordon Gekko is...
Well, he's also subtly tender.
Yes.
Gordon Gekko is a cartoon character. This guy is an asshole, a very, very wealthy, rich asshole. But you have some understanding from the beginning sequence with his father and everything.
There is that.
A quick sidebar. This is crazy trivia here. Did you read that the guy who plays his father does the voice for Mario?
No.
All the Mario games, all the Super Mario games.
Huh.
That casting's really good. That guy looks a lot like Michael Douglas.
I was going to say that. He looks like him.
I love that shot of the father. I almost wish that's the only shot they had other than him like laying on the ground. Because
where he falls, you mean?
When he's falling, it's a little too much. The reason I don't like that is because it's breaking the rule of the flashback idea, in my opinion. Because the whole idea of the flashback is like, oh, it's like a handheld camera that somebody's,
That's true.
So this little that really wide shot of him standing up on the top and he's in his robe or his smoking jacket or whatever. It's just I think it's a very iconic shot, and then the rest of the movie does. There's a lot to do with him, the father, how he lands and the pose he's in and what he's wearing, because the clown, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, he finds a clown. That's how the quote unquote game starts, is he finds a clown doll in the driveway in the same place and in the same position where he found his dad.
Right.
After he had thrown himself off the roof. And of course there's a parallel at the end too, because
he jumps off of
a roof intending to kill himself because he thinks he's killed his brother.
That's a very aggressive, therapy.
The idea that it was all planned, that seems like there's a lot that could have gone wrong with that stunt.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that we should just leave that out of the conversation, because it's very, like I said, it's very easy to jump into that and kind of tear this movie apart. But if you avoid that, it's a great movie.
Well, there's that.
And it's movie logic,
Yeah,
everything can't be like.
I do have some legitimate questions about the third act though that we'll get
Well,
into. But
that's an interesting thing because David Fincher kind of writes this movie off, and he's kind of ashamed of this movie, and he blames it on himself because he never figured out the third act. He thought that with the momentum, there's something about like with his quote is something about having the momentum of the full throttle or something about just, he thought he could just kind of push through it, and that for him it didn't work. And I guess for Brad it also didn't work.
It's not that it didn't work. I mean, it's like I said, the first time you see this movie, you don't notice these things. It's only when you do repeat viewings of it that the logic kind of starts to.
Sure. But it's also fun to watch this. I think it's a fun rewatchable because you can also kind of see who's maybe staring at him in the background and pick like the little details that they have throughout the entire movie. Cause Fincher's going nuts with all the little details.
Well, they have that one scene where he bursts into the CRS building. The company's called CRS, Consumer Recreation Services. And there's like a room with the entire cast. Like they're
eating lunch. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like everybody that he's encountered in the last couple of days. So like they're all in on it, like dozens of people.
And it's really, they do some interesting stuff that they don't necessarily have throughout, but it helps your like subconscious logic. They have an army guy, a guy dressed as an army person, a guy dressed as cops. They have and then if you're really paying attention, they have they have literally everybody, the detectives, everybody.
The two guys that he talks to at the racquetball club, they're in there too.
And the bum at the phone booth.
Oh yeah.
And when he's
he's in the one shot. You saw him for one shot. He's like running away from the phone booth when it's ringing.
But what I was going to say is this does sort of have one of David Fincher's classic. He does it in Fight Club, Seven, Gone Girl, where there's a moment in this movie where you think you kind of have it all together. And it's when they're on the roof and they're like, Christine is like, whoa, where'd you get that gun? That's not an automatic. That you're supposed to have an automatic. Where'd you get that gun? And then you're kind of like, oh shit. She's actually really giving it fully up, and he's actually going, there's a moment where you truly believe that he's going to fuck it all up. And they've pushed him too far.
Well, she sells it. I mean, Christine.
Yeah, it's an interesting role to play, I would think, where you're acting and it's an onions. Yeah.
But him throwing himself off the roof at the end does make sense for his emotional character arc, because that's what his dad did. And what I was going to say too, getting back to his use of color, now that we've kind of gone through the plot, is, and I think David Fincher does this in all of his films. I think he might be like our Stanley Kubrick. He might be our generation's Stanley Kubrick. That might be
for sure,
too strong, but because I love Kubrick, but
his demand for perfection.
Oh yeah, doing lots of takes and stuff. But
with Gone Girl, did you know about this about Gone Girl? He's splicing two shots together because he likes the take in one shot with the one character. Say there's two characters in one shot, and he might like the take from the girl in that shot, but like what the guy's doing, you know what I mean? And he's digitally putting those two shots, like stitching them together. Yes.
No, I didn't hear that.
He's a insane person.
I got to go.
But that's what you need. You need to be kind of crazy to be a really good director, in my opinion.
So we have like kind of, before he gets into the game, the color scheme is very grounded, very earth tones. Then when he enters the world of the game, and suddenly everything is now, there's a lot of green. Everything is lit with like neon and fluorescent, and it's just very stark contrast. And then at the very end, we go back to kind of the gilded,
The light,
the gold and brown and the grounded look when he's like the very last scene where it's his birthday party and we know what's happened.
I've said this, I'll probably say this all the time, but like his cinematic language is so fucking strong.
The character arc of Nick is very similar to Ebenezer Scrooge in Christmas Carol. There's, the Conrad character could be seen as like Fred, Ebenezer's nephew, and then the one guy is kind of like the Bob Cratchit character, the guy who he fires, his dad's friend, the book publisher or whatever.
Right.
Sort of like the Bob Cratchit character.
Douglas in the 80s and 90s, like Romancing the Stone, Fatal Attraction, Basic Instinct, Black Rain, which isn't that great, but I like him in it.
There's definitely a conversation to be had, and we might save it for a Falling Down episode. Whenever Michael Douglas was involved with the movie in the 80s and 90s, he was kind of the story of the movie. He had a lot of creative control. But in this instance, the story is more about the director. I think he trusted David Fincher, and he kind of relinquished a lot of like creative control to him because he kind of inherently trusted him.
Yeah. The game, I always forget that the game came out after 7. And when I was reading up on some stuff, so he actually shelved this movie because Brad Pitt signed on to 7. And that was like, oh shit, I got Brad Pitt. I got to make this movie. He actually was going to make this movie first, which is every time I think about this movie, I'm like, oh yeah, that's his first, after he did Alien 3, then he did the game, then he did 7. Oh no, the game is a tucked away one after 7. Panic Room is another one that kind of comes to mind but people talk about that one a little bit more because it's a little bit worse. It's like it gets a little bit more shit on for whatever reason. I love that movie too, and I would rewatch that any day of the week and do a podcast on it.
Sound and music.
Yeah, I love the score. It's one of the scores you almost don't even. There's scores that you wish weren't like it swells and there's too on overt and just taking over the entire movie. This score is almost, you don't even think about it. It's just perfectly kind of wedged in there. And there's moments where it sounds a lot like 7 because it's the same guy. One
thing I wrote down, and maybe this wasn't true in 97, but I think White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane is a little bit overused for moments in a film where the character's questioning his or her reality. It just gets used a lot for that kind of moment in a movie.
For sure.
It works here. It's the one kind of piece of, I guess, pop music that's in there, or like,
they use it twice.
Yeah, it's the closing credits, and then
it works.
It does. I mean,
there's a lot of times where shit like that. Jordan, who I just won't say his last name just for what.
I know Jordan.
But Jordan. He and I always are saying like they need to shelf certain songs, like a lot of Martin Scorsese used like all the Stones songs that he's used. Just get like, no one is allowed to use those songs anymore. Like, especially like, oh, it's a Vietnam movie. Throw a Stone song in there. Like, fuck you.
Every Vietnam movie has at least one Rolling Stone song.
Yeah.
Sympathy for the Devil. Yeah. Scorsese uses.
Yeah. Sympathy for the Devil. Get it out of here.
I think he uses.
And I would say the same for this. Get
a White Rabbit. Yeah. I think
another thing that they need to shelve that I wrote down is, and it kind of works. It can work, but that old film flashback thing.
Oh,
like the whole opening credits is that, and it's so long.
Where it's like Super 8 camera or whatever, and there's all kinds of scratches and.
Yeah, I don't know. That stuff can work. It's rough though. I would have trimmed that opening sequence down a lot. They kind of hit it over the head a little bit too much with the like, this is almost more coming from like an animator, or I don't know. This is very like nitpicky here, but
no, it's
like,
good.
They'll like lots of like, well, they'll jump in frames. The people will be walking here and then they'll jump over. They're just doing like I get it. It's old film. okay. like the premise behind the flashbacks in this movie is that it's literally old footage from like home recordings.
Yeah, like somebody got a
In
camera
Fight
and
Club,
filmed a birthday party. Yeah.
They're doing stuff where it's like when he's like, "You're not your fucking khakis" and stuff. It's like the film, the literal projector is like fucking up. In the film, you can see like the edges where like the teeth would roll the film through. I don't know the name of what that is, but you
Is
get
that
it.
like I think that's like a way of like breaking the fourth wall, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, Fight Club, man. He's just doing that movie is like obviously every bro and fuckface love that. Everybody likes that movie, which almost makes you want to hate that movie uncontrollably. Like that urge comes over me. You know, it's a very like college movie. Oh, did you see Fight Club? Like, yeah, like you're entering the college era of your life, and you know,
It was.
it's awesome though. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I was trying to think what that movie was when I was in college. It was like
Citizen Kane.
maybe like
Gotcha.
Clockwork Orange. That was a good one. Clockwork Orange, maybe. I don't know.
The Great Train Robbery.
Yeah, it's a trip to the moon. Yeah, good. All right, a couple questions I have.
Yeah, let's hear them.
So this kind of goes. This is serious. It's about kind of the logic in the third act, but this is a serious question. The encounter at the zoo, was that part of the game? Did they set up him watching? Like, because he sees that actor in a commercial. Is like,
that I love that.
Did they arrange for him to see that commercial?
So there's a very subtle, not subtle, but like if you're not really listening, whenever he gets drugged at his cabin, the girl's like, "We intercept your call. That was us." Like, it's easy to intercept your call. Like they like have a straight connection to his phone somehow. So anytime he calls out, they're like just answering. Like, and they're acting. So if he calls the cops, it's guess what? It's them. But if they see, oh, he's calling his lawyer, let it go to his lawyer. You know what I mean? I think that's the logic there.
Okay. So they arranged for him to see that commercial, for that commercial to air on the TV.
Yeah, and that commercial is it's just like him finding a key. It's a clue. Okay. For him to follow, like a breadcrumb. And then he goes... That zoo, real quick, that zoo thing, the zoo scene, there's a part that makes me laugh out loud. I always forget it happens. But, like, the kids start throwing stuff at one of the animals, and he's like, "Kids, stop doing that!" And then he turns to Michael Douglas. He's like, "Why the hell do they do that?" It's so funny. I think that they're heavily assuming, like, say, like you were, like, I'm talking through the minds of what's it, CRS?
Yes.
Like they're like, all right, who is he going to fall back on? His ex-wife. It's the only person he can trust, which they set up earlier. It's through the movie logic. That's, I think, what's happening.
But then the way he tracks down this actor is he goes to the Chinese restaurant. The guy, when he first went to the office, was eating Chinese food, and he made a point to say what restaurant it was.
Yeah.
So they must have planted that picture at that restaurant.
Or he is an actor, and that is a commercial he was in. And that is, he does have, like, you know what I mean? They could be taking from real life.
So they took one of his actual commercials and just stuck it on the air. But do you think the picture was planted at the Chinese restaurant too, for him to find?
See, now we're getting into yeah.
This is like third act logic that I don't know. All right, next question. So there's, like, at the end where they got that scene where Sean Penn pays the bill. And then Michael Douglas says, "Do you want to split it?" And then he looks at it and he's like, "Oh my God, how much do you think it cost? What do you think the bill was?"
It would have to be in like tens of millions. You don't. It's
right,
like
so-
a production of a movie. Like how long? Like imagine how long it is.
Yeah, they
At
got
least $1 million.
it's basically a movie production. The idea is that whenever someone hires them to do this game, they stage this whole production. They hire dozens of actors because they go in that room. And there's like probably at
It's
least
like hundreds. There's like 100 people in that room. Maybe I can't count people in like like my.
this would take some investigation, but I think
Yeah.
there's at least dozens, maybe hundreds of people that they've hired
And they're
that are like part of their cast. Because like at the end of the movie, Christine says, "Oh, we got another gig in Australia or something, and I've just got to walk on this one. I played a major role in your movie." So they trashed a car. I mean, they dumped a taxi cab into San Francisco Bay, and then
did they have to get like a permit for that?
well, yeah, I don't know. And
See,
it's
Brad, this is what we're
California,
doing. I told you that we shouldn't be doing this. There's a very subtle little callback in that scene you're talking about where they're looking at the bill.
Mhm.
When they're in the airport, when Douglas is in the airport to go fire that guy, he's sitting there waiting, and there's a gentleman across the aisle from him, and he points out that his pen leaked,
Mhm.
which sets up the whole like switching the briefcase thing, I'm guessing.
right,
But it's a CRS pen.
right.
At the very end, the guy who is standing there making sure he signs the paper, and Conrad hands the form or the paper, the signature back over to that guy. That's the same guy, the same gentleman in the airport.
So the bullets were all fake, right?
Yeah,
Alton?
that's. Well,
But there were clearly bullet holes in his car.
the bullet holes in the car, the bullet holes because the guys shoot through the lock of the door.
Right.
But I mean, again, they had to do that in the movie, right? I'm sure they didn't take a real gun and shoot the door up. God damn it, Brad, we're doing it. I said we're doing something. I have some things that might start a different conversation. Brad.
Okay.
Get your mind off of the logic here. One, when he's going to the airport and he's to fire that guy, he's waiting for his flight. There's a slow motion scene where he's walking, he enters the airport and he's walking, and he's he thinks he gets the game for a second. He's looking all around. He sees a gentleman like kind of looking at him and then turns away real quick.
Right.
And it's just a great little,
Well, that's kind of
a great scene.
when he's starting to kind of get paranoid. Like
He's getting paranoid, but he's smirking at this moment in that slow motion scene. Like he's like, "Oh, I get it, motherfuckers. I'm onto you." And they're also in that scene when he gets to the guy's office, and they're setting up Michael Douglas to be like an asshole by firing him. He's basically the old guy saying like, "I'll do better next quarter." And he's like, "No, like right now." And anyways, they're setting up Michael Douglas to be an asshole. But what the genius of that is it's setting up you're as a viewer, you're questioning, are these people actually fucking Michael Douglas over by taking his money and like finding out about his accounts, and he's giving up all this information about himself? And it is just a big ploy. It's not the game to change his life and how it actually turns out to be. It adds questioning throughout the entire movie. Oh, maybe he deserves this.
like I said, it's one of those movies that really works the first time through, where you, the viewer, are not sure what is happening.
It's kind of all of his movies, not all of his movies, but like Fight Club, Gone Girl.
His movies have twists that it doesn't necessarily make them not rewatchable. I think it adds layers, though. I mean, I've seen the game. I remember the first time I saw it. I remember really liking it and not like feeling the need to pick it apart. And then I don't know. It's just like you catch more the second time through. I mean, you already know the twists, but now you pick up on these little clues that he left that you don't necessarily process consciously the first time you see it.
It's like an investigative rewatch. Another thing with Fincher, there's a couple, there's two things here I want to talk about. One, he uses a principle of animation in his editing all the time. And it's sort of a principle of filmmaking, really, but it's a cut on action.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
And he uses it all the time in like, not like a action packed scene with like a punch or this or that, or he uses it for that too, but just how a character is moving from one cut to the next, he's extremely aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And he
makes the cut really smooth.
So yeah, the editing is so tight in this too. The editor he's used, it's the same editor as Fight Club and Panic Room, and the same DP as Zodiac.
The editor can only work with the footage they're given, and he gives them good footage, like the planning ahead, knowing what the character's doing from shot to shot. Gives the editor a lot of leeway, and you can make a really good edit if it's filmed right. Well, that was all the points I wanted to hit, I guess.
Yeah, same here.
Anything else? All right, cool.
David Fincher, he's the man. Michael Douglas, 90s. Forget about it.
Yeah. So The Game, good movie. I think we're gonna do Dazed and Confused next week. Tune in for that.